Okay, some movement here with 3 minutes remaining. And John, an easy decision to use his priority. And the pressure is on here. A little sticky on the first turn, but now has some speed to work with as he hammers down the line. Let's see what he goes for. And he goes to the reverse. His back foot slips off and he goes down. Jordy Smith, he'll be relieved.
Okay, now Jordy just saw that John fell, so he's going to paddle as hard as he can to utilize his priority and try to block John from getting the score he needs in the last 2 minutes.
Well, that stings. It was a hard section to come off. Even though there's that wind puffing at the moment, Ross, it just feels like the waves are a little flat to go to the air.
Yeah, that high tide gives it just a kind of a heavy water, and a lot of the times it pushes your airs out into the flat. It's always tough to handle that landing. Jordy is going to be forced to go in this wave because you know John's going to paddle for it.
Well, Jordy, I don't think he's in a position to get it. It's moving through to the inside. 1 minute and 40 seconds to go. John, he has a chance here, but he's got to get going. This wave's starting to reel off, and he will take to the air. A big frontside air reverse. He sticks it. He's only chasing a 5.94, and we haven't seen a lot of highlight moments in this heat. Jordy was a little far out for that one.
Wow.
And with just over a minute to go, John Florence proves just how dangerous he can be. Only needed that one section and stomped a big one.
Well, definitely the most technical and difficult maneuver done in this heat, but you'd have to think Jordy's still going to have another chance to get a score. So for John, he needs to get back into the lineup.
Well, how high will the judges go on that air? We'll find out in a moment, but Jordy's out there, and there is a set coming his way. We mentioned it earlier, he always has faith that J-Bay will deliver, and it turns up for the South African once again. And he is just flowing down the line. He knows he doesn't need much to improve his heat score total. He's going to pull through the back of this one. Meanwhile, John Florence, he's pushing wide. There's another wave in this set. He's down the line. He's having a look at it. The score in, a 7.33. He took the lead, and now he needs a backup. There's only 15 seconds to go. A tidy floater to start this ride off, and now he tries to stick the finish. He does that. Didn't quite get on top of that last section though. It won't be a huge score, and we're waiting to see what Jordy put away, and we will be waiting for the result. But what a finish to a very sleepy heat.
One of the strangest heats I've ever watched at J-Bay. You know, this did not unfold for either of these surfers the way they wished. So again, the judges rewarding progression for John with that big air reverse with the 7.3. Jordy, just a couple of okay turns here, no real mistakes, but trying to link together a backup score. So he's got the 6.3. This is the wave at stake right now for the backup score. So to me, it looks average. You know, like I think he will get that 3.84. But then John, in the last 15 seconds, gets this wave. So a much more difficult wave to surf. A floater, but kind of a risky floater because the section was so critical. And then a climb. So not that great of a wave, but John, keep in mind, also getting rid of a very low score of a 2.83.
These competitors might be tired. I don't think John's wave was anything special that last ride, but keep in mind, Jordy Smith's got to make up a point on the on the strongest exchange. 7.33 to 6.33.
Okay, 4.17, Ronnie. So now John's going to need at least a 3.17 to turn the heat on those two little maneuvers on that big wave. I feel like he's going to get it. That floater was done, you know, it's just a floater, but it was done in a very critical section.
This is painful.
They have to take that into consideration. You know, again, it's just a floater, but the wave was way overhead. Let's take another look at it from a different angle. Watch him get airborne off the floater. So again, that just shows you that the bottom dropped out underneath him, and then got one more maneuver in there and finished it off. So it's going to be so touch and go. Judges watching a replay, and this is going to be the tightest heat ever. As you mentioned, kind of hard to disagree with it. It might be tied
in which case John Florence would get the win with the single highest score, the 7.33. But the judges reviewing exactly what unfolded in the last exchange.
Well, in my eyes, no doubt, Jordy's backup score was better, and they already dropped that with a 4.17. But again, you called it. He has the higher first score, the 7.3.
Well, the scores falling into place now. On his last wave, John Florence puts away a 3.37 when he needed a 3.17. World titles are about overcoming tough situations like that, and John does just enough to get the victory. Jordy Smith, he will be salty, he will be devastated. This is his favourite event on the schedule. And have a look at the heat score totals. How close was it?
Incredible. And, you know, it came down to progression and being aggressive and attacking. John fell a couple times, but he stuck to the air. That gave him the edge with that 7.3 and just barely beat Jordy, who was sticking to the water and just trying to connect the dots with more of a traditional surfing, and paid the price for it.
Well, now after 4 head-to-head heats, the ledger is even between Jordy Smith and John Florence. John getting the jump on Jordy in his strongest contest on the schedule. And, well, what could have been a very forgettable heat was somewhat memorable in the final stages.
That's exactly right. It was kind of a funny heat. Both guys made a lot of mistakes. The waves were pretty forgettable as well, so it was always going to be tough. But, again, very funky heat.
What a finish. Rosie Hodge, what did you make of it?
That was so intense, and like you just said, bizarre is just the word of the day. I mean, the way the waves were pumping through this morning, and then that heat, Kieran, obviously slowed down. You know, what's the decision from the Commissioner's office? Will we see competition, you know, keep going?
It's tough out there. I mean, we really did kind of see something we weren't expecting this morning, and it was looking great out there. Everyone was really keen. Right now, we've just seen the ocean kind of shut down. That wind's really blowing in now, strengthening up from the side. So we're going to actually call it. We're going to go off and come back and reassess tomorrow. Kind of forecast is looking interesting for the next week. There may be some potential near the end, and I think it's probably going to end up better than what we got.
Well, I'm interested to hear what Joe and Pete have to say about that last heat, so I'm going to throw it down to the host sets.
Thank you very much, Rosie, and Kieran Perot, Commissioner, making a tough call this morning because we saw some really rippable conditions in the free surf. And they were like, okay, let's get this thing underway. We saw the great waves. We saw Mick get a couple of 9s in the dark. Next thing you know, the ocean goes flat. We get a restart in one of the heats that we were waiting for with John Florence and Jordy Smith. And then what a close decision. The last couple of minutes of that heat were maybe the most dramatic we've seen of the year so far, Pete.
And, of course, for how slow and sleepy it was for the first 40 minutes. What a finish. I mean, that was exciting. I mean, I was sweating. I had, you know, my palms were itchy. It was one of those amazing finishes. And again, I mean, Ronnie and Ross up there in the booth, they couldn't really even decipher who won that heat. And it came down to, you know, incremental pieces of a point. So exciting. But I feel for these guys because they really didn't get to perform to what they wanted to and potential-wise, but it still was exciting.
And John had to adapt using that air game to a secret weapon in these conditions. As we look at the heat recap, this one started off first thing in the morning. Two of the biggest names in pro surfing. Smith, a 2-time J-Bay Open champ, has been looking so solid throughout this contest, and he had a solid lead in the beginning just by getting the 6.33. That sounded like a gigantic number up at this point of the day.
It sure did, and you remember in the beginning of this heat we had a restart, right? So they were way up the point. There was actually a set that kind of came down that actually had potential, but they were way up top. And then finally you see at the midway mark, or I'm sorry, this was the last 5 minutes, you know, that's when the heat started. You know, there was a string of waves. This air right here really decided it. You know, it was 7.33. He was able to get the final move on it, you know, good score there. It was a point higher than Jordy's wave. I mean, and then just to have this play out in the very last seconds with a set at the end, you know, this 4-point ride, and it comes down to backup scores. I mean, so crazy. We talk about, you know, what we do, a marketing slogan of we can't script this, and you can't, and that's what the ocean brings. That's why it's so exciting.
Unpredictable nature of the rhythm of the ocean is a crazy one here at Jeffreys Bay. Just one heat run, a quarterfinal with John Florence and Jordy Smith coming down to the beach to make the decision, and the local favorite upset out his local wave, a former two-time J-Bay Open champ, out of the contest in really challenging conditions. And Florence, world number 3, moves on to his first semifinal here in South Africa. It's a dramatic morning here in J-Bay. We'll hear from John Florence and Jordy Smith right after this quick break. Stay with us.
soul, you got power, baby. Life is love, love is soul, and soul is power. Soul, power, soul, power, baby.
Welcome back to a very interesting Sunday morning here at the J-Bay Open. We ran one heat. John Florence and Jordy Smith, and the contest is called off for the day as we wait for better conditions later on in the waiting period. Joe Chappelle alongside former big wave world champ Pete Mel. What an interesting morning. It's rare that you have one heat run and then you call it off for the day, except when you come to J-Bay. We've had some short days here in the past. Conditions looked really ideal earlier this morning, and hopefully we'll get better conditions because we know how important this is for the world title race. Pete, think about John getting that score. Now into the semifinals. He's got Tahiti coming up on the calendar. Lowers where he's finaled before. He's been the champ in France. Things are really looking good for the Hawaiian now with that close victory.
You know, and Wilco's on hand too, and you know, Matt Wilkinson was probably watching that one really closely, and was like kind of rubbing his hands together when he saw for the first 50 minutes, and you know, the 6.33 of Jordy. It looked like it was going to be Jordy's morning, and then you know, there's that 5 minutes of fame for John Florence, and it came for him, and you know, those are the kind of things that happen when you get momentum shifts, and again, that's why we're so drawn to this sport and to watching competitive surfing, and it was exciting. You know, I don't know what's going to unfold for the rest of this waiting period. That's a real kind of roll of the dice as well. It doesn't look positive. There is opportunities, but the winds look weird, and then all of a sudden you've got the end of the waiting period. There's a swell that may or may not be there because it's forecast. So it's been a funny day.
Very interesting day, as we know, an important heat for John for the world title race, but also for Jordy Smith since he was inside that top 10 picture. An unfortunate loss for the local, as we will catch up with Jordy Smith with Rosie Hodge.
Well, Jordy, pretty much all of us are baffled by that heat. I mean, the conditions, pumping before your heat, and then just seemed to someone flick the switch. I mean, what are your initial reaction to that heat?
Overscore on his last wave, pretty much. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, the conditions definitely aren't the best. Everyone knew the wind was going to come up, but they decided to run. There were some waves before, but you know, the charts show that it's going to get more and more windy throughout the day. So yeah, contest is off. Unfortunately, these kind of things happen, and yeah, you can't really do too much about them. End of the day, it's up to them. You just got to go out there and surf.
And you have actually watched that replay on the big screen, so like you said, you've digested that and taken that all in. So your opinion, I mean, what do you do with that now?
There's not really much I can do. It's not up to me, it's up to those 5 guys. So they make the decision at the end of the day. Just super bummed out. Would have liked to have had some clean open walls for sure, and kind of a better battle. But that's why we love surfing, for these kind of reasons. Yeah, I just gotta. Hopefully, I can get the bump on the next one.
Right, Jordy, thank you for your time.
A very disappointed Jordy Smith out of the contest with the quarterfinal results. Not happy with the decision on the score on the last decision. As Ronnie and Ross were talking upstairs, they were almost like this is a tie. It was that close of a call on that last decision for Florence, getting the score on that 2-turn combination. When you look at the whole outcome of the heat and look at all the waves, John used that air game. He got a pretty big punt in that matchup to get the high single wave score, which was really made the big difference in the outcome.
Sure did, and I think if you're going to look at the whole heat in general, I mean, that was the highlight. So, I mean, he got the heat win. Again, he clearly disappointed for Jordy Smith, and he wasn't down here this morning to, I think he was just going to focus on his own game and not be part of the decision and just go with the flow. And I think that that's some way of dealing with all of this too. If you get too involved in a decision and you get distracted from what you really need to do, is just go out and surf. And Jordy took the right road. I think he was on a good plane. Everything seemed like it was going to work out for him, except for that last 5 minutes.
It's always tough to hear that painful side. You feel for Jordy Smith in the top 10 picture, former champ here at J-Bay, but now going to the other side, surviving a heat like that and getting into the semifinals has to feel really solid for John Florence. Florence is with Rosie Hodge.
Well, John, we've been saying the entire time that was such a crazy heat, but when we look back at the end of this year and we think about the world title implications, do you think this is one of those scenarios that you'll be looking and just be so happy that it tipped in your favor?
Yeah, for sure. Just that last wave, I don't know, everything was so close in that heat. It didn't paddle out. When we paddled out, I was kind of expecting it to be bombing. It was before the comp started, there was just set after set after set, and so I think we both kind of waited thinking that those sets were going to come in, and we had one restart, and then we would have had another restart if I didn't go on those little bad ones, but it's definitely gotten smaller, the swell, and just kind of need to learn to adjust to that, and stoked to make it through. That was a scary heat.
And let's just talk about that heat. I mean, you guys started up, it seemed like no one wanted to give up the inside position, then the wave just went completely flat, so just talk us through that whole scenario. Yeah,
in the beginning we were just kind of battling each other way up top, and like I said though, I just kept thinking there was going to be sets the whole time, and then we've eventually kind of got into the rhythm of the heat, and it was just so slow, and there was a lot of mid-sized ones coming, but I don't know, to myself, I kept thinking, I'm like, okay, there's going to be a bomb, I just want to be on that set, and he got that one real nice wave, and then, so that's all I kept thinking, and then 4 minutes, came down to 4 minutes, I was like, oh God, I just got to go on anything now.
And another thing, I mean, you guys are so confident you guys can do big airs at the drop of the hat, but it almost seems as soon as it gets that stressful situation, you almost don't even have faith in a floater.
Yeah, it's pretty scary in those last couple of minutes because you just start overthinking things a lot. And I don't know, I just got to those 2 last ones real quick and got that mid-sized one and did an air, and then the last I just did a floater and then a snap, and so stoked to get a 3.1. That was my favorite 3.1 I ever got.
And semifinals now, I mean, you must be feeling pretty confident. You throw that heat away and just kind of be positive for the next couple rounds?
Yes, definitely. Just be positive, be happy I'm still in it, and just kind of adjust everything to the conditions are changing, the wind's coming on, and swell's dropping.
All right, John, thanks for your time. Well done.
Thank you very much, Rosie Hodge, and great to hear from John Florence reacting to a very close decision against Jordy Smith here at Jeffreys Bay as he moves on into the semifinals. But I love the way Rosie put that. You don't even have faith in a floater sometimes.
That's the truth,
right? Routine maneuver for a guy like John and Jordy, and it was that close. It was that dramatic. A very sleepy morning where everyone was sort of stirring during the restart, and then everybody was on their feet watching that final exchange, Pete.
Yeah, and it was a stark contrast from his interview this morning, right? His interview this morning was he was definitely a little sleepy and questionable, but as soon as the adrenaline kicked in and you get that heat win in such a dramatic fashion, John was a whole different human, and that's why I think we get so attached to just surfing in general, because it can change your moods pretty quickly.
Seeing John Florence in that first semifinal, he'll be met by the winner of quarterfinal number 2, 11-time world champ Kelly Slater will take on Josh Kerr later on in the waiting period. Julian Wilson has an all-star matchup with former world champ Gabriel Medina, 3-time world champ Fanning with Felipe Toledo. Still some heavy heats to look forward to, and we're hoping that we'll get some really solid conditions. It was really interesting before we called it off this morning. Josh Kerr was ready to go. He was ready to surf that heat.
Yeah.
This is air wind for him. He would have had a blast out there. The majority of the feeling of the rest of the surfers in the draw was, let's try to wait for better waves.
And you know what? Like, we could show up tomorrow morning, and it could be on. So that's literally how trippy and wild and woolly this place is. So we'll be here at 6:30 in the morning for our call time, and 7:30 dawn patrol. We may have pumping surf.
That's right. Well,
Positive Pete.
I like your positivity, Peter. Let's check out the Surfline forecast and see if you can get even more positive as we roll through the maps here.
Well, look at just the waves of red. You know, that's why it's so wild down here. And we don't really have any buoys that really to speak of. And, you know, it's a place that you get so many dynamics with warm water, warm weather, cold weather. Winds come up and back off. And the forecast after like 3 days out changes so quickly. You know, today is supposed to hold through, you know, about this afternoon. And, you know, this is what happens when you get that lower interval, when it drops like that, the consistency backs off, you know, and then you go looking through here. We got that Wednesday, Thursday bump again, forecasting the winds to be a little bit funky, but that's also 3 days out. So that could change just as quickly.
Looking at those maps at Jeffreys Bay and comparing to the other stops on tour that you always are diving into the forecast, is this one of the harder places to predict swell?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the South Atlantic in general, because you've got South America and it dips all the way down into Antarctica, that little gap there, that just, you know, that water feeds off of warm weather coming off of Brazil. So yes, it is one of the most dynamic climate regions in the world, you know, and that's why it's so, you get such big energy too, you know, and you know, going into the Indian Ocean, you've got that whole dynamic as well, and yeah, it's a tough place to forecast.
And the good news is we do have plenty of time. A lot of things can change, like Pete was saying. Maybe we'll be on tomorrow. We already finished the first quarterfinal. John Florence is in that first semifinal, and he'll be met by the winner of quarter number 2. 11-time world champ Kelly Slater has found that winning feeling, and he's taking on Josh Kerr when the J-Bay Open continues. Let's get excited for that matchup, and we'll see you bright and early tomorrow for Dawn Patrol. Take care. Josh Kerr looking for something big down the line. Reaching for the stale fish.
Kelly Slater in the barrel.
Beautiful speed, power, and flow. This copyrighted event broadcast is produced by the World Surf League for broadcast around the world and may not be retransmitted, reproduced, rebroadcast, or otherwise distributed or used in any form without the written consent of the World Surf League.